This episode is presented to you by NFL Sunday Ticket, now on YouTube and YouTube TV. With NFL Sunday Ticket on YouTube and YouTube TV, you can watch your favorite teams' out-of-market Sunday games, plus watch up to 4 games at once with Multiview. Don't miss the race to the playoffs. NFL Sunday Ticket is now just $39 when bundled with YouTube TV, where you get even more football. Visit youtube.com/Spotify offer to sign up now. Lowest price on YouTube TV with base plan. Rest of 2023 season. Terms and embargoes apply. No cancellations.
The holidays are a time to feel and create joy. And what could be more joyous than the look on her face as she unwraps a stunning new jewelry piece from Blue Nile? How about getting 50% off your purchase? Blue Nile offers premium quality, priced below traditional retail. Their online experts are available 24/7 to answer any questions and make sure you've picked the perfect gift. For a limited time, you can get 50% off at BlueNile.com. That's 50% off at BlueNile.com.
Reboot your credit card with Apple Card, the credit card created by Apple. It gives you unlimited daily cash back that you can now choose to grow in a high-yield savings account that's built right into the Wallet app. Apply for Apple Card now in the Wallet app on iPhone and start growing your daily cash with savings today. Apple Card subject to credit approval. Savings is available to Apple Card owners subject to eligibility requirements. Savings accounts provided by Goldman Sachs Bank USA. Member FDIC. Terms apply.
Introducing Royal Caribbean's newest ship, Icon of the Seas, the ultimate family vacation. The ultimate 6 slides, 8 neighborhoods, 0 compromise vacation. The ultimate never done that, can't wait to do it vacation. The ultimate chillin' by a different pool every day of the week vacation. This is the Icon of Vacations. Icon of the Seas, arriving in 2024. Book today. Come seek the Royal Caribbean. Ships Registry, Bahamas.
Welcome back to the second episode of The Blue Turf. This is Thad Bell from the Blue Testament. I have with me my co-host, Erik Bergrud. Did I say that right, Erik?
Yeah, Bergrud. You got it.
Okay. I always worry about that, man. I always feel like I'm going to mess up people's names. Anyway, Erik from Park University and one half of the Comets broadcast team and longtime soccer guy around Kansas City. So we actually have games to talk about today. Our first episode, we were just kind of talking, preseason and all that. 2 games against the Ambush, one in St. Louis, one in Kansas City. Split the games, each home team won. Tell me what you saw from that first game, Erik.
Well, Leo Gibson wasn't playing in that first game, and I think you saw Leo Gibson play in the second game. That's my cute, snarky response to you, that Kansas City's had a hard time in recent years playing in at the Family Arena in St. Charles. I think in the early years of this current incarnation of the Ambush, Kansas City would head across the state, pick up pretty convincing victories, but in recent years it's been tighter. I think you can see some of the challenges that Coach Leo Gibson's facing in terms of developing his roster with Rion Marks out, and we can talk about his status. That sort of created a vacuum in terms of who's going to score the goals. And we saw on Friday night the goals coming from behind the forward line. We saw Lucas Sosa with 2. And even on Saturday, when he decided to play himself, most of the goals came from midfield and defender. And so for me, one of the big questions for this team this year is, who's going to score the goals?
Yeah, and I know they're a little challenged right now with Rion with an injury. Not sure when he will be back. I've heard it could be quickly. I've heard it could be a little bit longer. Too long for Comets, taste, obviously. And then, some of the guys are battling with the visa issues that after, some league rules changed. So hopefully some of them will be back sooner than later. Benji obviously could add some scoring touch. I think Junior Kazim could add some scoring touch. But yeah, that's always the question, though. I mean, sometimes the Comets are really hot, and sometimes they can put 40 shots on goal and score once. It's hit or miss.
Well, so on Friday, I think they found out the difference of the St. Louis Ambush when Paulo's in goal, because Paulo what's the expression? He stood on his head, 19 saves on his first game back after knee surgery, and Paulo was out all last year, and I think you can see the difference. He carried the team that night. They won. The Comets had the chances, though, in overtime and could have put it away. They didn't. Then they paid for it the other way. And so I think they made some tactical adjustments on Saturday. Good to see James Togba in the offense, and he scored a goal. But I think that this year, unlike previous years, they're going to have to find multiple guys to carry the load. And what's ironic about this, that is, in thinking back to the inaugural podcast, I said this about St. Louis. Without Mo NDI there, they were going to require a team effort to score goals across that roster. And I almost think that I was talking about the wrong team. I think the Kansas City may be facing that this year too.
It could probably apply to quite a few teams. One of the positives I'm going to take out of the first game is, despite missing quite a few players, despite Leo not playing, I want to say O'Dane was a bit of an emergency signing to make sure they had somebody out there, and such a nice, wonderful guy, but he's a wee bit slow at this point in his life. So, all of those factors, and they still had that chance to win it on the road against a bitter rival. I don't want to say bitter rival, a heated rival. We'll find a better term for it.
I-70 rival, that one you can't ever go wrong with.
Yeah, that's very true. But despite all that, they took it to overtime. They almost, like you said, they had their chances to win it, and then they took it to, it was that close against a goalie that was standing on his head. So that's a positive. If they can do that against a heated rival across I-70, that maybe they can continue to do that against other teams.
Well, I think this, regardless, the team believes in itself. They believe in the core there. And I thought was interesting was to read some fan reactions, not only after Friday night's loss, but even after Saturday night's victory. And so I don't know if it's an issue of fans' expectations being set the last couple years, where the frustration may lie. But let me summarize in a couple different ways. It's easy for indoor soccer fans to look at the goalie as the GOAT or as the savior. And I think in the case of Neto, he's a consistent guy in terms of he's going to play the same way game in, game out. When you score 10 goals a game, it doesn't really matter if he plays aggressively in the back. You're going to win. When you score 4 goals a game like they did, 4 goals and a loss on Friday, 4 goals and a win on Saturday, it kind of magnifies what happens on the defensive end. But on Saturday in particular, I thought Neto made some outstanding saves, saved a shootout attempt too. And so I think fans are just kind of searching for who do we believe in and who's going to carry this team. And I think that with injury issues already, with visa issues, the question is going to be who's going to step forward. And I think we can talk about who will be the logical players on this team who elevate and carry this team through the month of December.
Yeah, and I think in any sport at any level, I mean, I've seen fans heavily criticize the Chiefs after they won 21-3. I mean, just because they didn't score, 35, right? Sometimes fans are just, I mean, that's what they are. They're fanatics, right? Now, I won't argue with, I sometimes wish Neto would stay home a little bit more, but he is exciting. He is a great shot stopper, and he could potentially take over a game and, shut it out and help them win when they're not being able to score. So I'm not going to criticize him too heavily. Like I said, I wish he'd stay home just a little bit more at times, but he is fun. Now, let's see. That was one of the things that we kind of forgot to mention in the first game is that last goal. But that was the goal they gave up when Neto came out and they got by him.
I understand that, and if you watch the replay, O'Dane Sinclair was trying to track back on Marcel Berry, and Marcel Berry just flew by. And so, did Neto make a split-second decision, go outside the box?
Yes.
Sure. Did it ultimately cost them, sure, but in the way Barry made a good Wallace score a pass to Otto Yahic, and there it was. And so nobody else stepped to Barry. Neto decided to, and there you are. And if the ball never gets inside that yellow line, we may be having a different conversation there. And so it comes with the territory of being a goalkeeper. You accept more responsibility. There's this old adage about strikers can kick how many balls into the stands and nobody remembers. They score the game-winning goal and it's all the glory. It doesn't work that way with goalkeepers.
Nope.
The other thing I think with Neto is, and I know we'll likely be talking about Kevin Ellis later in the podcast, he plays an interesting role in this league because he's become sort of the guy that fans on other teams point to. Like, there's the guy we don't like. And we've seen this with St. Louis fans making comments about Neto. We've seen this with Wave fans making comments about Neto. And I think that energizes him and makes him play better. And so I see where fans are coming from. I understand that fans traditionally will say stay back in your line, but I can reel off goalkeepers in the past that fans have talked about as well, who've been willing to let's just say play forward and not stay tethered to that line. And ultimately that's what the Comets signed up for when they made Neto their starter. And he is the starter.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you mentioned, nobody else stepped up there. There were a couple of Comets that probably should have been moving in that direction, but maybe just tiredness and whatever else they didn't. Or I don't actually remember who was on there on the field right at that moment, but a couple other players probably should have made that step before he did to do the cover on that play. But again, it's what it is. I hate that term sometimes, but it's the first game. It was a loss on the road against the heated rival, blah, 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 right? But they come back home and it's a good response. They never surrendered a lead. They basically shut them out for an entire quarter. Didn't, very few chances in that one quarter. So they had a 2-1 lead all the way through the third quarter, most of the way through the fourth quarter before Leo added that goal. Thankfully, he did.
And Wallace scored. So Ray Lee, I've been watching a lot of Ray Lee. It's sort of interesting, and teams don't want him to shoot with his left foot. So he's adjusting his game a little bit. And he ultimately decides to pass off to, I believe it was John Sosa in the corner, and John Sosa finds Leo running through the box and sort of scuffed at it, dribbled it into the corner, and not his most powerful shot that he's ever taken, but definitely effective. And at that point, ambush goes 6 attacker, and Ted Sane takes care of business to make it 4-1.
Absolutely. Now to that second game, well, both games, and you mentioned it earlier, a little bit of Kevin Ellis drawing some attention from fans. It seems like now that he's went to St. Louis, he actually relished it while he was here, but Kansas City fans liked it a little bit. But now it's even more so, I think, is he's relishing a little bit of a villain role, playing the instigator and, doing a little bit of antics with stuff. Is that how you saw it?
Yeah, well, let me take a step back. So I had a conversation with let's just say somebody connected with the Comets about Kevin Ellis before Saturday night's game, and a reminder that if you look at the buildup to all of St. Louis's goals, Kevin Ellis had a role in there. So regardless of what people want to make about his reactions, etc., he's an effective player, and he can play in a lot of different roles. And I mentioned this on the broadcast. When he played for the Comets, he could play defense. You can push him through the midfield. You can play him at forward. He plays multiple roles on power plays, and we've seen him score with his head, with his feet, whatever else. And he wound up scoring both goals for the ambush here on Saturday night. Well, sure, he had an enjoyable opportunity, let's just say relishing his return back. But I think this is a role that's made for him. And I thought what was extremely funny is, of all the people in the world, saw a comment this morning when I was on Twitter by Derek Huffman, who responded to a photo of Kevin Ellis and he said, "Hey, Comets, at least I never pretended to be cool with you. Guys like Ellis did. I love this." So I mean, this game has always had villains in it, going back to early days, and occasionally it's the goalkeeper. It's not always the goalkeeper, but I know the Comets fans for years have made Derek Huffman sort of the target of their venom, and now I think that maybe that's going to be shared among a few players.
Yeah, probably. One part of me hates the idea that, it's going to be about villains, but yeah, it does actually draw a lot of conversation and attention and fan interest. So, yeah. So I guess we could say Kevin did the heel turn, as they would say in wrestling, right?
You could definitely say that, and there's some parallels to that as well. And sometimes they're the ones who get the biggest headlines and draw the crowds in.
Yeah, we will still have to see how he does throughout the rest of the season. But you're right with his talent. He has the potential to be one of the top players in the league. Like, I mean, he's played in MLS. When he's playing well, he was one of the best players. He could top 5, top 10 player in the league. Maybe the top player even. I know I'll get a lot of argument on that, but maybe one day we should do a pod on who's been the best villains over the last 10 years or so.
We could absolutely do that. I'd say though, here's the one thing that it's to be determined, that is, there are all sorts of rumblings about the St. Louis Ambush locker room, and there have been players that have come, there have been players that have gone. Stories about Mo NDI last year, who's now playing for Empire Strikers. They have their kickoff coming up this week. How does Kevin Ellis fit in there? And is he going to be a unifier or not? I guess we'll see. I did talk to Paulo on Saturday. He didn't play, which was a bit of a surprise. It was a surprise going in, but when I thought about it, it makes more sense coming off an injury, not subjecting him to back-to-back games. But he talked about the leadership within that core unit. So you have him. You have Lucas Almeida, who's now a player assistant coach. So there are some seasoned veterans there that are trying to help elevate the newer guys. It'll be interesting to see where Kevin Ellis fits in all of this.
Yeah, I have some thoughts on that, but I'll probably save that for another pod.
Fair enough.
All right. Coming up, the Comets don't play until December 10th, I believe.
That's correct.
They got a couple weeks of practice to get in. What do you see they're needing to work on for that time?
My biggest observation from Friday night's game was their susceptibility to the counterattack. And that's something I noticed last year. And I think that's something that St. Louis took advantage of. And so how you set up your defensive lines, I still think that it's expecting a lot of John Sosa, who's been playing for a long time, to push up in the offense and then be able to hustle back to prevent a counterattack. And so how Coach Leo Gibson, assistant coaches, I should say, Stefan Stokic and Jenna Weinbrenner, how they set up those lines, I think are going to be critical, because to me, I think you want a fleet-footed pairing with John Sosa. And what we saw with Sosa is, in both games, put him on free kicks, put him in situations with the game on the line, and he has no fear of shooting, and definitely the capability of scoring. But I think they absolutely need to work on the transition game, both defensively as well as offensively. Yeah, I think we saw some positives on the power play, but they probably need a little bit of work on that. And then Togba impressed me because I think he's definitely going to elevate his offensive game this year. And we saw him taking on William Eskay, who is also one of the fastest guys in the league. I want to see how they create situations for Ray Lee as teams try to force him away from his left foot. How do you put Ray Lee in positions to score? Because going back to what we said early on, Thad, it's right now not looking like the forwards are going to be the ones scoring all the goals on this team. So I think that's issue one. I think issue two is Leo and is going to have to figure out a conversation with player Leo. Where do I fit in? And so are we looking at a regular line? Are we looking at potentially special teams? What does that have to be? Because one of the things we saw last year when the roster was fairly normal is Leo would occasionally play defense. Leo would play special teams, and he wasn't relying on himself to be the point or be the target. How do they adjust now, knowing where they are with strikers? And as you said earlier, we don't know about the prognosis of Rion Marks and when could he be back. They have a couple weeks to get healthier, and we'll see. Big game at Mesquite, but then they have to turn around and play against the Milwaukee Wave. And what I'm hearing is Milwaukee is going to be better than what we saw last year.
Yeah. Even though Leo may have done a lot of different positions last year, he also was one of the top leaders in goal scoring and assists. And so for people who say he can't play, I think that's probably a statement against that. Him scoring the goal in this last game is a statement against that. I do kind of think that he needs to play a few less shifts and be more cautious on that. But it's also, who else was he going to play in this last game? I think O'Dane played a lot, I think, in the first half, but not much in the second half. And I don't know if it was an injury or just he'd played a game the night before. In that game, you got to protect some of these guys from too much running. I would have actually liked to see Nick McDonald been on the roster last night or Saturday night, but that would have given a faster, or not necessarily a lot faster, but a faster and healthy guy. But again, you never know exactly what's going on practice and things like that. So when we criticize from the outside, it's easy. It's a lot harder to make that decision when you're the coach.
So then you start trying to figure out, how do we create situations for other people to score? And that potentially is what you work on over the next couple of weeks. We saw Lucas Sosa with 2 goals on Friday night. We saw Togba score. We saw Sosa score both games. We saw Tetsane score. And so where are the goals going to come from? I think that when the Comets look for situations to leverage their speed, and that's Tetsane going down the left side, that's Togba wherever you want to put him, that may be where they look on. Maybe I overanalyzed this on Saturday, but it seemed to me that they adjusted to create opportunities for Togba, and then he scored that first goal. I think you look at who are the guys, particularly if we're playing back-to-back that next weekend, who are the guys that we can count on who are going to have the legs to take us through? Because Mesquite, we don't know a lot about yet. They were out during COVID. They're back. Newish roster, or reconfigured roster. It's hard to know what to expect there. You know what to expect on Milwaukee. And when Milwaukee comes here, Ian Bennett's going to try to put on a show. You add on top of him LSO, Marcio Lete, Derek Huffman, etc., and it's going to be a battle. So I'm sure they're starting to think about how do we get wound up for that weekend.
Yeah, I think it was a good observation about Togba. He scored that early goal, and then I did notice that they would often try to isolate, it's been kind of a common thing in history, is you try to overload one side and then isolate one guy to the other side and let him take somebody on. And once he's beaten that guy, then you have a swarm coming in from the opposite side of the field. And I think that's what they were trying to do with Togba. And I think he did it well early, but I think they shut him down a little bit more as the game went on with that. So it'd be interesting to see if they will switch out some, maybe like which guy is that guy a little bit more often. Maybe that's now Lucas Sosa or Tetsane or somebody else that will have that chance, that who's a quick dribbler. If we had Benji, that would probably be him. It's those options, and it's that change.
Yeah, and you ultimately have to play with who you have to play with, right?
Yep.
So we could sit here and talk about the injuries and the visa issues, but ultimately Leo's job is to figure out what team gives us the best chance to win, and then there's questions about guys stepping up. We heard a lot in preseason about Lalo, who didn't really get too many shifts. We'll see if he gets his opportunity. Mike De Silva, I always like on special teams, but I think they have to do a better job of getting him into the offense, the regular offense, not just on special teams. And then again with Leo, how many shifts, as you said, how many shifts is he going to play, and what makes sense for him, not just at his age, but strategically what makes the most sense in terms of how do you maximize his use on the field.
All right. So one other interesting thing happened on Saturday night. I think there was a guest coach up there in the suite level watching the game, Coach Lasso.
Jason Sudeikis. So what was funny is I heard this was going to happen earlier in the day, and of course I couldn't say anything about it, but I was watching the Comets social media, and they kind of teased it just a little bit about stars being in the house, and they used the hashtag believe. And so when this was right after they did the flex cam feature at Cable Dom Arena, and then all of a sudden you saw him in the suite, and started picking up on social media. I saw Adam Snaves had tweeted it out, and then Comets grabbed a photo after the game. Some of the staff members with Jason, I think Jason's family was there too. So a great moment, and he was wearing the retro Comets jersey that they wore last year, the 40th anniversary jersey. So that was a really nice touch, kind of old school Kansas City.
Yeah, no, that's priceless marketing there for the Comets. That'll be something they can use for a long time, and just a lot of attention, which always helps because there's still people that doesn't really know as much about them as they should.
I guess I'm getting old enough, Thad, that there are so many younger people in Kansas City. Their concept of soccer, professional soccer, has been Sporting Kansas City, not even the Wizards, because they don't even remember when they were the Wizards, but Sporting Kansas City, and more recently the Current. And it seems like people forget that there was this whole indoor soccer tradition dating back to 1981, but because of how everything has changed in the soccer world in the United States, the Comets in a way were ahead of their time when they were in the Kemper Arena days, and now they're trying to find their identity amidst all this happening. Plus, and we haven't even talked about the World Cup. So you have the World Cup happening, you have Major League Soccer, you have the NWSL, and trying to teach a new generation or a younger generation about the magic that is indoor soccer. That's really hard to describe. You can't really compare it to anything else. It's not really hockey. It's not really soccer, but it delivers moments that you can't experience anywhere else.
Oh, absolutely. If you gave me an opportunity of, pay me $1 million to play indoor soccer or outdoor soccer, I would choose indoor soccer because I enjoyed it much more. I enjoyed playing it a lot more. I'm a fan of both games. I'm a fan of men, women, indoor, outdoor. I even enjoy futsal, which angers some indoor fans. Which I don't understand. They get mad about somebody enjoying a different form of soccer.
What? There's no walls? What's that all about?
I know but it's at least every opportunity the Comets and the MASL and all the teams can get in front of more fans, at least to go, hey, why is he there? Something. I'm not like the marketing guy. I'm the hey, let's talk about the game guy. But it is still a great opportunity. I'm not sure how it came about, but it's really good. And the Comets have got to make the most of it as when they can. I got some shots of him from when he was up there in the retro jersey. And if he's about town wearing that, or it's some event and he wears that, that's just going to be even more priceless marketing for him. But I know there's been a lot of speculation how the Ted Lasso series would end, right? Because it's like maybe he'll give up in England and come back to Kansas City to coach, and kick Peter Vermees out of Sporting Kansas City. Like, hey, maybe he'll be back and play for the Comets. Maybe they got to put that idea in Jason's mind.
Who knows? And I think what last night, or I guess that was Saturday night, reminded us is the power of media and how it's changed soccer and changed everything. And I know that there are a lot of fans who weren't too happy with the decision to move from YouTube to Twitch. And I think making it beyond one's personal preference and kind of looking at the bigger picture, ultimately, it's about getting a younger generation engaged in a sport. And for me, I was 14 when I attended my first MASL game. So trying to reach people where they are rather than asking them where you want to be. And I think that it's a challenge for longtime fans who've stuck with this game going back to the 80s and 90s to see how things have changed so dramatically, but they've also changed in a positive way, because there were so many teams that never even had any TV, let alone a decent radio signal. If you could go back in time to the 1980s and see what the media coverage of soccer, indoor soccer, was now, and look at all the opportunities today, you would be flabbergasted in terms of how good people have it today compared to the way it was back then.
The chances for me to watch soccer back then was, zero almost. I did as a teenager watch Steamers games because I grew up in St. Louis. Sure. When I moved back there after I was in the military, I watched the St. Louis Storm games. I went in person to them a lot. But I was indoctrinated to soccer by a middle school guidance counselor who had lived in Europe for a few years. So that was really how I even really got a good experience to it. And I grew up in St. Louis, which is outside of St. Louis, which is the soccer hotbed, according to them. And we'll see how that goes. But just getting that, like you said, the generation that's been around for a while with the Comets is trended older. I mean, it's an old demographic that is the hardcore fans, and you have younger fans come in, but it's finding them more often and getting more of them in, which is the challenge. And I know last year when they switched to Twitch, I've got to be careful how I say that. The engagements went up dramatically over being on YouTube, because it's not going to get promoted on YouTube where it was on Twitch. And I don't know how. Well, obviously we've only 2 games in this year, so I don't know if anybody's looked at those demographics. I'm sure somebody has. I'll ask about it maybe next week or so. But it's going to get in front of other people who might just, people who watch other people play video games, which boggles my mind. I mean, I've done it a few times, but getting some of those people engaged in watching indoor soccer would be a big boon to MASL. Absolutely. So it's just always trying to find how you can get them connected in through a TV show, through I remember in the old MLS days, we saw a MLS jersey on a TV show and people would go nuts.
Andrew was playing for the LA Galaxy.
Yeah.
Remember? Yeah. Melrose Place actor. I mean, they tried everything back then.
And, and the MASL has to kind of do that now. I mean, bringing in, Landon Donovan for a season playing, he played he played a handful of games, like a dozen or something. I don't remember the exact number, things like that. So just getting that attention from any way you can is they got to do it. So it works.
Well, I had this conversation with somebody, Thad, where I like to poke at the 80s. And I say this as a child of the 80s, that indoor soccer is glamorized how good it really was back then and tends to forget some of the warts and challenges. But
This episode is brought to you by Google Pixel, the official fan phone of the NBA and WNBA. The new Pixel 8 and Pixel 8 Pro are built different. How? Take the Audio Magic Eraser tool that helps block out distracting crowd noise so your play-by-play commentary sounds crystal clear. The only phone engineered by Google brings out the audio you care about so your videos sound as crisp as they look. Learn more at googlestore.com/pixelnba. Audio Magic Eraser requires Google Photos app. May not work on all audio elements.
'Tis the season to shine with H&M. Discover the holiday collection and find fashionable pieces for your wardrobe or for under the tree. Get inspired and dazzle with this year's glam. From tuxedo styles, bow detailed pieces, impressive prints, and more. From unforgettable looks to unforgettable gifts. With fashion finds to home decor, find it all at H&M. Treat your loved ones. and yourself this season. Shop in-store or at hm.com.
If you were to go back to the 80s, and if the fans there or the teams have been reminiscing 40 years later, they would have been playing the Andrews sisters at all the home games, and people would have been crazy. And yet, so my running joke about Danger Zone being played for the 13,000 whatever time at in Kansas City is, yes, I think it's important to celebrate the past, and I probably more than any announcer in the entire league draw back on the past in the broadcast, and yet we have to look forward at the same time. And so it's a balance between celebrating the history, which I think the Comets have gotten it right. And I think the reunion nights they did last year and what they have planned for January 21st this year is the right thing to do. At the same time, we need to look forward, because ultimately you want the average age of a Comet fan to approximate what a Sporting KC fan is. And it's not necessarily bring the station wagon to the game like it was when I was growing up. The game has evolved, the marketing has gotten a little bit more sophisticated, and ultimately I think what we want to see is people seeing a Comets game is on the calendar and knowing I have to be there and I don't want to miss it.
Absolutely. And I think that like prime demographic is like the 20 to 35 age range, because they usually have disposable income. They buy beer, they buy jerseys, they buy hot dogs, et cetera, et cetera. You want a certain percentage of kids there, so they grow up with the game and understand it. And when they can spend their own money, they go. And then, you have the older fans who may not go as often, but, still remember back to when, Kim Runtvid looked young.
Hey, Rocket! I didn't say that. That was Thad.
I just had to. Sorry, I literally just picked the older player out of my head. So
he was once called the Danish darling. So there you go.
No, man, he was amazing player, still a great guy. So I loved when he came out of retirement and played against Vlaco in that one game down in Wichita. So.
But if you go back, since you mentioned that, if you go back to that era, the league went out of its way to, let's say, leverage sex appeal of players. There were some very intentional moves the league made to get a younger demographic. In this case, it was women and not just men to go to the games. So there were competitions, awards. There were players appearing clothed, not totally unclothed, in adult magazine. I mean, it was everything happening back then. And so I'm not suggesting at all that it makes sense to duplicate what teams were doing back then. But what I think you can learn is that you have to speak to what makes sense of your era and the demographic that you want to reach. And I think the league is making the right moves, and it just doesn't happen overnight. And it's easy to lose patience, just like I think you can look at one or two games and make all sorts of comments about where the Comets are versus where they're going to be. Ultimately, what matters is who's going to be lifting the Ron Newman Cup championship at the end of the year. And the Comets, I'd say today, just as I would say last week, they have a shot to go deep in the playoffs, and we'll see what we'll see.
I'll disagree with you a little bit, because yes, it's important to lift the Ron Newman Cup, but I think it's more important to have that stable base of teams that are continuing to grow their fan base. Because if San Diego wins it again, or Florida wins it again, or Milwaukee wins it again, or God forbid Baltimore wins it again, that sort of thing. Well, it's good for the league, having different teams win it and all that. But if their attendance continues to grow, it's not good if a team wins it and their attendance is 500 people in the stands. So it's one of those, the greater good, rising tide lifts all ships, blah, blah, blah. Lots of platitudes could be used there. But if I want to see the league here tomorrow, next year, 10 years, 20 years, I want to be wheeled into the arena to watch games. So, you know what I mean? And we need the clubs to continue to grow.
Well, And I agree with that, and I'd say that it's important that shows like this continue, and not just in one or two markets, but in markets across the league. I think that what Nick and I try to do on Comets broadcasts is to be league positive,
right?
Meaning that we spend quality time engaging fans from other teams. We do interviews with players from other teams. In fact, the only interview we ran at halftime was with St. Louis's goalkeeper, which it would be kind of rare on it every other broadcast. And so
Yes.
I think that if we, and I'm talking about Kansas City at this point, redouble our efforts to grow interest in the Comets and also do whatever we can to promote the league just across the board, I think you'll see that goodwill duplicated across the league. And I think good things are happening with other teams in other markets. It just takes time. And I think that what doesn't help is comparing where the MASL is in 2022 with a totally different set of circumstances than what the MISL was in 1987 and drawing conclusions on that. There was no MLS in 1987.
Exactly.
The internet wasn't even really around other than in Defense Department terms back in 1987. And so there's more competition. There are more discrete audiences for everything today than the way the world operated then. And so I think we can celebrate the past, and we should celebrate the past. And sometimes Nick and I, maybe more me than Nick, get dinged for spending too much time talking about the past on our broadcast.
Yep.
But at the same time, we're also forward thinking too as well, not only during the broadcast but outside the broadcast.
Totally agree. And unfortunately, we are out of time. So thanks to everybody who listened. Let us know what your thoughts are, and we will talk to you probably next week.